Okay, so this side is going to be Trunchbull's office slash lair. And originally I sketched it up. I wanted it to feel like we were in like the basement, because that's a creepy place, at a private and creepy place. And I want to have a lot of what looks like close circuit TV screens, like she's watching everything. And we'll talk about that at another point. But I've got 5 of these grids out of windows, which are a really nice thing to grab. If you see that on the side of the road, along with this thing, this hearth. Architectural shapes and forms that are fiddly or need to be nice and square and perfect and are lightweight or cheap or that break down flat like this thing used to do. All really good things to consider stocking up on. We can make big flat surfaces and stuff. We can make stairs. There's really no merit to grabbing stairs when you find them, unless you really don't have any capability out of your scenic shop. I mean, because like we say, stairs are unique to the situation. They vary quite a lot. So this piece is supposed to be Honey's house on the other side, and the duality of the characters, the duality of the set, I think is fun. I was thinking I'll put 2 casters underneath the edge of the desk and then 2 casters underneath the hearth. But I started thinking, like, because the thing is I want the wall to go to the floor. And I was thinking, I could get 2 casters on the outside corners and then 2 under the desk, and I've got 4. But the swing of those doesn't stay within even 2x8 wall. If you were to frame a wall, and I'm never against going wider than 2x4, because when we see this aspect ratio right here in the audience, we know that this is built from 2x4 or something similar like that. As soon as you start going thicker with the wall, it lends it a bit of credence at the 3/4 view, as though it's a more substantial kind of a construction. And of course the lumber's more expensive. However, to stack a wall or to frame a wall wide enough where instead of a bottom plate on the bottom edge, sending it up enough to mount a caster to, so that it could stand vertically and the caster could spin around. We've seen that we need an 8.5 inch ability to spin there, which means we need to get into a 2x10, a true 9.25 wide wall with luan on both sides, with a 9.25 plate across the bottom and 9.25 studs, which at 10-foot lengths, I mean, you start 2x10s, you're starting to multiply by orders of magnitude the cost in framing that wall just to put casters inside the bottom edge of it. And I may do that in the future depending on whether or not we have massive construction going elsewhere. But for now, we're going to use 2x4s because they are cheap enough. That all being said, where to go with the other set of wheels? Well, I tried them in the desk. You saw me put all 4 in there. But at this height, now we do have a discrepancy here. I need to add a block behind the base trim on this desk so that this gap is the same. That way, when we're sitting flat, we know that the wall is plumb. And so that's just a factor of figuring that out with math and adding a stick of something there. I like seeing that shadow separation. Somebody might say, well, cut the back edge of the desk flush and sit tightly against that. I actually like a little bit of dimension if I can get it there. Whether it'll wash out completely with the stage lights is, kind of likely probably. But then when I get to that point, it's still too tippy. So I'll probably end up tipping it over again, taking the second pair of wheels off and putting them in this hearth. They're gonna, if I were to mount them into this is thick enough. It is just MDF, but it's thick enough to just screw right in, which is what I ended up doing here, consequently. So the leg screws instead of nuts and bolts, same sort of amount if you have a nut on a bolt here sticking up, but I can see that the drawer was going to want to slide in here. And so doing it this way, I don't mind reaching in here now with the grinder wheel and cutting those off flush so the drawers can slide back in. If it was a nut and a bolt, it doesn't matter to cut the bolt off flush. The nut can't grab anything. So I went this route, and I'm happy with that. We'll do the same thing over here, but they will hold us off the floor some, but that's no problem. I can make some strips of luan as a skirt and apply them to come down to about a 1/2 inch from the floor. But the thing is how to manipulate all of this stuff, how to tip this. I'll probably go back on its back now, take that apart, add what I need for thickness, and then we'll want to glue this together, I think. You saw me throw it together. It was on the side of the road. It's in like a flat pack. That's the benefit of it. Initially, in shipping, it can be flat packed. But now I'd really like for it to stay 3-dimensional and not be a rickety pile of shit trying to fall apart. In fact, I don't even want to bump it. I'm going to take it apart quick here and squirt some PL Ultra Max in there to dry over till tomorrow. My watch is dead, but hopefully if we're at 3, so overnight to 3 a.m. is 12 hours. So by the time I get in here, at almost 11 tomorrow morning, it'll have had 16 hours or, coming up on 18 hours, whatever, to dry up on us. And the MDF that's been drying in the basement is even more prone to sucking moisture out. Hopefully it glues up quick enough, because that'll be kind of where I have to call it. And then once it's a solid piece, I can put the wheels on it, and I'll have to try to lay this thing over on its front, put this up in space. And the thing is, you just have to get the surface of those wheels, because when you get down to it, the two wheels on this unit and where it's mounted to this wall, and the two on this and where it's mounted. Now right now it's flush to there, but like I said, this hasn't got the same depth as that by a subtle amount. We just want to get it so that in theory, those wheels, the plane that they're on, is perfectly normal to the plane of this wall. And there'll be a little variance out here, but we can't be measuring that, trying to use the level or check for plumb out here and do all of that. We're going to have to use math and make sure of it. And then we know that we've done the best that we can do, and the wall should be fairly plumb. But that'll be kind of a process here that starts with gluing this up tight. And I've got some other things that I'm thinking now, because if Trunchbull's wall is in somewhere at Cruncham Hall inside, well, then we could do like Judge's panel or wainscot to whatever height, and pick a wall finish type of color and material, faux material, whatever, frame or trim the window out and everything. But then another issue that we've got here is how to be at Cruncham Hall in places like the classroom, because we've turned the other side of this set piece into the library, which I've mocked up here. Now this is one of our, I think we have 3 of these 10-foot tall by 4-foot wide bookshelves that we built for Beauty and the Beast. And we flew those in when the library reveals itself in that show, and then we flew them back out on a bar. It's kind of flat. It worked okay. This year, like I say, we have 3, and I want to do a few things here. The way that we're looking at this is actually going to be, imagine that this is, the main curtain over there. And so I think the library is going to stack up here where the library door is rightmost, and then the circulation desk and one of those bookshelves stuck to the side of the set. But we've got the roof angle of the Wormwood house on the other side. We've got like an eave and an overhang and a soffit, which I really wanted to make sure and put on the set piece for this house. I want to see this stuff to make it look very house-like. I don't even like a real house, because you don't have to have an overhang, but I don't like it. It looks very unprofessional not to have that. However, as soon as you're looking at the library, we know it's the other side of this set piece for the most part. But if I could stop you seeing that overhang, for example, with a flip-out panel of Luan, or even the bookshelf itself, I'm also going to frame up and come across, not quite to the peak of this thing, and that's another thing with this problem with having to be below the projector. I got to figure out what we're going to do. But I wanted it to be go up and have a flat crown mold right along, and then square up over here. And I wanted this little peak of the Wormwood roof to be crown mold, but then turn and go up, and then turn and go down and over, which makes sort of a municipal shape, more so like a library as well. And then the last thing we can do is we can choose to put this eave, when we tuck it into the main curtain over there, we can choose to put it behind the main curtain and lose it entirely as well, with the way that we park it on the floor, and if we're careful and cognizant of the fact that we don't want to get wrapped into the main over there and tear it down or anything like that. But so the thing is, we got one of these panels. Now we could fly in the other 2 adjacent, but we've got to be at the library a few times. And if we mount them and hang them and fly them in to make the library, then we're married to this location, to this set piece, relative to those probably, to make the library happen. And we start running into problems with where the bars can be, etc. Now, go back to wanting to be at Cruncham Hall for the classroom and some other places, because we haven't got a backdrop now at all to be there. It isn't going to be on this side, but we know what our finishes are like because of the finishes behind Trunchbull's desk. We could take that and we could try to repeat that out to make sure we know that that's interior Cruncham. So how would we do that? Well, that's a 10-foot high backdrop to her office. Now we've got these screens this is actually jail bars in here. Okay, and that was for Chicago. This is my 10th show, but I missed one. I popped off to the superintendent, who wasn't being very helpful with regards to me being paid in a timely fashion, and so she kiboshed my contract year before last. And so for 1 year, they had someone else come in and build the set, and they preferred, in some ways, to use steel. In fact, I agree with the situation here. It's a steel frame welded with the casters on there, and then it's a wooden frame within that with PVC bars. And that keeps us nice and straight. I mean, for the size that steel is, that 1.5 square, 1.25 square, whatever it is, it keeps us real nice and straight. And you couldn't really frame with wood and leave it and trust it, especially when you're going to paint it. It would pull and be all wonky, and it wouldn't even sit flat. So they made us these, but they're going to make, we like to use stuff like this over and over and over again. We've even rented them out for Chicago. But in this show, we've got this hospital green color. In the beginning, when we line these up, we got 4 of them. Line them all up that green, we could be in the hospital, right? And then they've got the sort of bright colors on the other side for that musical number at the beginning of the show. I'm going to flip these right around. Now, I've got some flat disc magnets, and we're going to stick. That's another nice thing about it being steel, but we'll probably have to modify these so that they fit better. They're a bit big. I don't know what they're made custom or what here, but we can just click and just pull the center line of the color right down, click 3 on each side. I got enough magnets, and we'll take some of the bagginess out of it, but it ought to work for that. But that's all the more we need these, and it's at the beginning of Act 1. So then they come off stage, and we can take the magnets off, slide these covers off, and so I want to make a thin box for at least 2 of them, if not all 4, depending on what we can afford. So if I was drawing this, here's that rolling curtain box made of steel. But if I were to lie, I believe it's 1.5 inches thick itself, that steel. So if I laid a 10-foot 2x4 flat down both sides of it and across the top to where it would slide down and sit, and they would hover off the floor, and then I tied the top together with a flat 2x4, and I could, these are narrower than 4 feet by a good amount, and so I want to make it probably a total of 4, and then clad it with Luan both sides. Then it's a thin box that slides right down, and I could notch out for right around those pieces that come out and support the wheels. And we actually aren't going to stop on any of that. I could do a nice clean job with a hole saw and open it up to the floor, and just and it'll stop on this piece, and it'll register fully around that frame, and it'll make it a 10-foot tall sort of thin Luan panel with 2 sides. Well, the Luan on one side could be transferred off the panel for the books. Over there, you can see it's an 8 and then a 2-foot strip. So I could transfer that Luan with the books glued to it right onto that surface. And on the other side of that, on that Luan, we could use, here's Trunchbull's office with her desk and her window. We could put one of our windows that we've got above just to match that one. We put the same wainscot on it, etc. And here, we can make another one here. So at least one of the bookshelves is on the set. That's the library. The other 2 bookshelves are on the other side of these Crunch'em Hall walls. And so they can supplement Trunchbull's office if we want them to. Certainly, I don't know why we wouldn't. And then we've got at least 2, and we could do 2 more if we just wanted to put this finish on one side of them and forget the fact that we haven't got books on the other side of them. But we could put, in that case, 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these and space them out, which we did back in How to Succeed in Business. We just hung in some finished Luan for that mid-century modern kind of, what's the Mad Men kind of office from that era. A lot of those big mahogany panels. So we flew those in kind of separate. But when we were in the gymnasium or we're in the classroom or anywhere else, we could just roll in. We could do a semicircle. That's the thing. They're not hanging. So we have the freedom to bring in as many or as few as we might want. We can move them around and put them however we want for a variety of locations within Crunch'em. And same for the library. If we want to scoot the set over there and face the library side out over there as an alternative setup to tell another part of the escapologist and the acrobat's love story against the backdrop of the library setting, then we can choose to either leave off of the bookshelves in that case or put them in some other place. We have flexibility because they're up and rolling on wheels. So I thought of that as being kind of an epiphany here, because we were having trouble making sure we could be everywhere we need to be with strong visual communication. And so these have got strengths, but they've also got weaknesses. This color here, at the very least, if not darker, needs to be the color around all of the books. So I want to put somebody on painting those down so that they have more depth. They need to be really dark in there. And then we should probably, I don't know if we'll keep this cord around. I mean, it's on there, but I'm going to have to take it off to get this Luan off. But we should use 1x or something, and do a true face frame on this thing and just flatten it down to give that some depth as well. And that'll really help being darker and having two styles and maybe a a piece of base across the bottom. And that's it, because I won't necessarily want to cut holes in and bring those books right down to the floor around these, right? Maybe we'll stop that here, or a little higher, and I'll make a baseboard that has the notches for these, and basically get a fresh coat of sprayed black and everything. So I'll park them on some cardboard and black them right out so you hardly notice them. But then maybe through the baseboard, these will come through. And having a bigger, see, right on the floor is just unrealistic. So having what appears to be a heavier base, 2 styles, the front of the shelves, and I don't mind that ornate top right now anyway. So I think that's sort of formulating a plan on how to cost effectively make a few more supplemental set pieces, utilize stuff that's already been commissioned for the show, and it just worked out coincidentally that we don't need those toward the the rest of the show. And if the other 2, if we were to do all 4 with interior crunchum, and we only needed 2 to be library on the back, well, we've got 2 others that could be supplemental Honey's house. And then it would be a duality situation again. You'd have the central piece and the 2 supplemental pieces on either side. And then we turn it around and it's the sad little hearth at Honey's house. And these very simply may just look like big sections of missing plaster over some lath in a couple spots and painted the same color. A couple of hanging pictures, sad little pictures of students' artwork on crinkled up paper or something. Simple enough to throw together, but they fill out the stage. Because I don't mind a small square set piece, but believe me, adding the supplemental pieces on the sides will not take up that much more room, and it'll fill the thing out without being a massive piece. Quite obviously smaller, more remote locations, but it never hurts to have a little bit more to form them out. Even if you need a door to enter or exit, a portal to enter or exit, being able to park one with what amounts to a door space between them, then you have a bit of a portal to do something like that rather than walking on and walking off. Nothing that hurts a production to do, alternatively in other ways, but I like to build stuff and I try not to make it too much space, take up too much space, because it's, in the end, we want to get as many students out to participate in the performance as possible. But I hope everybody appreciates a solid setting that helps you understand the action. So that's where I'm thinking. And like I say, we've got these windows. It's going to come together. The numbers are working out. I'm feeling very serendipitous on this idea. Hopefully I cut this segment in because we choose to pursue this in some way. I still got to bounce it off the director, so we'll let you know how that goes. Meanwhile, I guess I'll get to gluing that up so it can start drying. All right, I got some shims underneath that to kind of get it to stay up straight, and got the hearth pushed up to it carefully to where it's not disturbing those glue joints, hopefully. But, this being Honey's house, one of the things I was just standing here thinking is the handiest thing to do to create exposed lath areas would be to actually put some old lath up, if I could find some. Or something like that, and then just expose it. I definitely don't want to do the whole wall like that. Although you could, if you had enough stuff, that would really be, relatively quick. You don't want to add it to the surface of the wall, and because it won't catch light correctly. And behind it, if I was going to leave it to be empty behind it, I'd have to actually spray this all black, and then put the clean lath on, and then cut some areas out of the luan to show it. But if I don't want the luan to teeter on the thickness of the lath, I have to cut down the face of some of those 2x4s where I want the lath to be applied. So I've got some thinking to do on what would make the handiest situation. If I were to thin that up, I would want to, I don't really want to use the router, but I don't know. Slice with the circular saw, take a 1/2 inch out or something, or 1/4 of an inch out, and drop it in and try to slice it in a few places. And then just hack the ends of that off where it's still connected and rip them out of there and throw some lath up in that area and have that be the area. I kind of wanted in my sketches to show it coming out to the edge. And so if you do that, then you can see the pocket between the ends of where there is lath and where there isn't in the edge of this thing to whatever degree from the 3/4 views in the house. So maybe the thing to do is to find enough old lath to just throw it on the surface. I could just shoot it on there quick with a nail gun and then throw the Luan on it. I guess I'd spray paint this all super dark brown, and then I'd put the Luan, or then I'd put the lath, and then I'd put the Luan so that the end grain of the lath is actually shown here. And then where we cut the Luan back before I put it up, it'll make sense. So I got some thinking to do. This like real construction anatomy, cross-sectional exposure, is necessary in some places and unnecessary in others. But if it's a unifying theme, again, I was talking earlier about this being a thicker wall. I had kind of hoped in the, you know, where would I go if I had more time and money and more manpower and stuff? I would start doing things like this would be a lot thicker, and it had texture on the edges of it. Like for this show, I don't know what it is about this show that makes me want to do this, but I would put some styrofoam up and I would texture it to look like broken off concrete block and try to do it with the painted layout of whatever blocks. Like this area of the school isn't like that, but a lot of places have like ceramic or porcelain tile faced block with grout. Anyway, and I'd make it look like it was kind of a broken, like it was really made of block, you know. It'd be fun. Things like that we can't afford to do here. So I'm dabbling in that a little. I'm like wading into that idea. Each new show that I build down here, I play around with some ideas. Getting down to the way that I built those trees for Shrek last year was something that rolled around in my head for, you know, years and years. I forget the earlier show that I originally thought I wanted to try that, but I continued to develop that idea. We might get down in the future to more of this exposed construction anatomy and being tricky about making it look like that's what things are made out of and stuff. But this will be where I dip my toes into it with this show. And so that's, you know, on my mind there. And then I got the library kind of kicked off over here, like I was talking about. And I ran this all by the director, so I think we're in good shape here. But I've got to figure out what we're doing with the ridge of this piece and whether we can get that projector out of the way. And then and get started. We got a little more material that we'll need to frame these up. I think I can make us, since there's 4 rolling frames, I can make us 4 free agent pieces of Crunch'em Hall interior walls, and then the reverse side of 2 of them will be bookcase, and the reverse side of the other 2 will be Honey's house. And we could put that off till the end if we don't feel that, well, that's the thing, if I'm doing the laugh, I would do it on the backs of those pieces too. And so we could supplement Honey's house central piece here with a rolling wall piece on either side that are finished to match, with a piece of furniture on them or some other stuff to round out her space. Same as, because I'd be remiss if I made 4 rolling pieces of Crunch'em Hall to go across behind us at the gym and some other locations if we're going to be, in the classroom, excuse me. And then if we were to pull this out and they'd be tied together with this visually, we should use them to either side. And then, like I said, I like the duality of it where we turn around. If it's Honey's, I'd like to see 2 supplemental pieces of Honey's house. Alternatively, if this is the basement, we could do something different here and not supplement it. So we could have 4 rolling pieces of Crunch'em Hall that we don't use with Trunchbull's office, and instead I could take this 5th window, and instead of installing it like the others, I could do more like I had planned, and do it horizontally, because there's room enough on this piece, and put us in the basement. And I could do some cool, I've got some large diameter pipe sections and stuff like that. I could make it look as though there's pipe and stuff running overhead off of this piece and some conduit, and you know, really make it like a basement like layer where she comes to spy on, and you know, whatever. Maybe it doesn't make sense to make it to basically spread out the pieces of crunchum wall that are in other finished places where the children are welcome, and insert this with the same style of window and same finishes, it could feel, and again, this is sort of subliminal. It's not really the focus of the story, but maybe that is a weird choice when we get all done, and it looks like her office is right in the hallway, or adjacent to the classroom, or any other number of things. So I think the thing to do is to get up and rolling and commit those panels to being crunchum, and then really think about whether or not it makes more sense to make this a bit more industrial and a bit more dingy and darker and more unique, which would relieve us from having to make supplemental pieces of Honey's house. And if I was going to go hard with that lath operation, try to do something kind of physically here, it relieves me of having to do that with the other two pieces as early as when I would do it here, because I was going to play that Honey's house finishing those to the end, and we didn't get there. If we didn't get there, then who cares? But if we decide we want them to start with the lath process, it'll be a real pain in the butt. I'm not sure if anybody's following this, but there's a lot of ins and outs and what have yous. Maybe we'll just get the Crunchum Hall pieces done and get that scenario up and rolling, and just continue to develop this idea as we get into more blocking and get into tech rehearsal, and try to decide how things will be cohesive and what's working against us. So I guess the lesson is just to maintain that yourself. If you don't feel the pressure to fully design the show before you get started. That's the way that they used to do this when I was a student here, and I would be asked to do some artwork or something on and they'd show me the models of the pre-designed pieces, and I think that's fine. I think that it forged me, and it gave me an appreciation for where you could, and I'm sure professionally speaking, that's what that's what folks do, have a full design. But it's just me here. If I needed to start spreading the work out to others, I'd have to have pre-designed components. I do, is the thing. I know that we want some columns for the gates to crunch them if we can get to it, and I've got some stuff that I could draw for someone else to make. So I've often got pre-designed stuff that we can bank on, and areas that we're going to discover and play jazz, metaphorically speaking, to sort of figure out how they best work. I'll probably completely center this desk. I think that Trunchbull, being a neat freak, it'll make the most sense. You could always play it left or right under different circumstances, but I'll center it. And then, because of the duality, I'll probably center the hearth. I think it just makes a nice, tall, thin situation. The other thing I could do, and it's not really in keeping with, I was going to say it could look like chimney, but this isn't brick itself, and so you start getting into what the exact look of a woodwork hearth. Maybe we'll end up spraying that black and then dry brushing grays and popping some of that architectural stuff that came for free that you don't really see well under these lights on these tones. I hate to lose like a natural finish wood because it's not easy to get back. However, in a previous show, I chose to use polyshade on a bunch of our pieces to give them like a natural dynamic tone and a gloss, and it kicked our asses. I didn't like how it looked at all. Mostly because you don't notice how unflat Luan is, especially when you paint it with an eggshell color and fill it with light like we do in theater. But the shininess of that stuff when I chose to do it in circular forms and curves was all wiggly, and it betrayed the fact that it wasn't perfectly smooth. And so that's perfect in a sense, so we might get away with that. But if I were to make it look like stone or something else, then there's the chance that I could build what looks like the chimney, even if it is like a parged or plastered chimney centrally, and then just a bit of wall on either side. That would save me doing lath across the whole thing. Lots to think about here, but time to head out for the day. I left a bunch of signage so that nobody's touching this stuff in the school day tomorrow before I can get here. But we'll come back and continue to work out some of these different choices that we have, options that we still have, okay? And I've got some things I can dial in right away. I'm going to get the magnets out and see if we can fix up the way that those curtains flow, because they're already starting to do choreography with those, and the dance number, they're getting in the way. So I'm going to start helping out. I got to get some more wheels for the medical chair. I found this on the side of the road outside of a nursing home. It still kind of smells like nursing home. It has a tear in the foot of it, but we can fix that or it won't even necessarily matter. But the wheels are junk. And so those are a stem caster designed to fit and friction fit up into the tube end of that. And so I did a quick measurement at the 7/8 interior diameter to that tube, jumped on McMaster and spec'd out 4 friction fit 7/8 stem casters with soft wheels on them. I think it'll end up being like about $200. They're 25 bucks each. So yeah, about $100. So we'll soup that baby up and it'll smoothly roll around. I'd like to see that as a dentist chair in a little shop production. So I didn't mind making that investment. All right, that gets this piece up and moving for now. Allows them to use it, see what it looks like in the house, get some blocking going, lets the glue dry. It wasn't as dry as I wanted, so I added, and I was going to put blocks across the back anyway. I just walked away and forgot to do that. Kicked myself all night about having, wished I had, so then the glue was drying. But with screws holding it, now the glue can dry and everything can just dry while it's up and rolling, which is cool. I'm going to probably illustrate. When it comes time to make this look like lath showing through, I think the easiest thing to do is going to be to brush back and forth horizontally with whatever dark brown color I'm going to use to knock most of the framing lumber that's going to stay visible here to look older and oxidized. If you get into an older house, the interior framing lumber isn't a blonde tone. It's been there oxidizing, and the tannins and stuff in the wood all together, it ends up being darker. So I'll come back and forth horizontally with something like that when we lay this thing down next to paint it. And then find some 2-inch masking tape. You can get a stack of that blue tape that's junk, really. It comes in a 5-pack. And just with a few guidelines on here to keep it from going out of perfectly level. A little bit of Kimbo is good, a little bit of looseness. So I'll just pull out and stick it to mask, representing the lath with a 1/2 inch or something gap all the way down this thing. And then we'll just quickly mask this off with a big garbage bag or something, probably, or even pop it back off. There's only 4 screws holding it. And then spray black. And then we pull the tape up, it'll look like dirty old lath with flat black gaps. And then we can use some wrinkled up paper and spray glue like we did for Shrek and put like a wrinkly plaster texture and tear the paper and let it flap down so it's like combination plaster / wallpaper peeling off or whatever. And with that we can get ourselves a pretty good ways, and that can wait until later. So for now, some things about these rolling frames and turning them into supplemental walls. What's really nice here is that the person who built these built them out of 1.5-inch steel. So 1.5-inch dimensional lumber is going to work great for the framing, and it'll allow hopefully it's not too perfect, and I'm going to leave some gappage on side to side so that the luan can bulge a little bit and slip over this thing like a glove. But we're at an actual, and hopefully this isn't, again, leave a good amount of tolerance in case these steel members bow out slightly to the side where you build at the top dimension and you slide on and stop because of that. So we'll check them all, every single one, but we're under 3 feet here, under 36 inches. So that'll be just fine, depending on, at the bottom, we're 36 and 1/16. So, if we go to 36 1/4, let's go across the top. We're at 36 1/8, or even more than that. So if we go to 36 1/4, in terms of the spacing here, you can slide right on there. Now, these actually weigh up a good amount, and it's a good indication of what we're dealing with here for total, it's a significant amount that this weighs up. I'm going to take this 1x material off of it to start with. However, these are already 4 feet wide. And so I had considered just whatever the two, if it's 36 and half of a 2x4, that's the thing. I'm not going to go right up the side of these with a whole 2x4 because we're just adding more weight and we're consuming more material. And since there's several of these to do, if we were to cut a 2x4 right in half, like that, and then use that on either side of this thing, that's enough to screw to. And it will be held straight in this aspect by the fact that the steel was used. See, we're out of straight there, but once we slide over this thing, you'll have no choice but to straighten out for the most part. So I'll rip one 10-footer to go down either side of these walls. However, I don't want to make these bookcases any narrower, because look at them now, they're pretty narrow, the aspect ratio. And then you start getting into taking some of it off the bottom, and that's all stuff that can come to us later if we want it to. If we want to take that 2-foot section off the bottom and then represent more wall like above or below, I'm not sure. We'll have to see. It's more magnificent this way, and it's certainly all done this way. But since it's already 4 feet wide, then we're going to have those 2 sticks in here on either side of the steel, and then we're going to have a stick on the outside to finish the edges, basically, to control them. So we'll probably do 2 10-foot rips to the very outside, and then I'll immediately go to rips of 8-footers on the ones that go along next to the sides of this, because we don't even need full 8 feet before we're looking for the horizontal one to go across everything and stop us from coming down to touch the floor. So one 8-footer ripped in half for either side, one 10-footer ripped in half for either side further out from there, and then the other parts of that 8-footer to jump across to stop it, and then once more at the top. And hopefully that'll be 2 2x4s and 2.5 sheets of Luan used. Well, when Don and I picked this medical chair off the side of the road, we had a good laugh, but I'm looking at, the construction of it at the time, and I can see that you got some seriously industrial quality stuff here. And for what it is, it would be a different take on a dentist chair or something, from Little Shop. It has a variety of things that you might be able to get out of it for different shows. And it was mobile. It was on rolling caster wheels, which meant that it's right to start with going to be set up for on-stage purposes. But they're cheap, and they don't want to roll, and they amount to a stem caster of massively inappropriate size and quality wrapped up with tape. And so I went with some McMaster car stem casters, friction fit. If anything, they're a little bit too small. It's a 7/8 interior diameter, I thought. And that's what these are sized for, so they go right in there. I thought it was supposed to be friction fit at 7/8. As long as it's nice and long, so as long as it stays put on the floor, we probably can use those. However, I will look into upsizing when I have a second and or possibly modifying. The thing you can do here is, rather than like your impact gun has a friction ring like this that ends up, it's freewheeling, but it's a little bit bigger in diameter. So I could open that up a little bit, possibly stretch it. or I could replace it with a big heavy rubber O-ring, and in finding the right one, it would be able to shove in there, but it would really, you'd be able to pull it back out again, but it would take a little bit more doing. Than this almost wants to fall out. So we've got some flexibility in that. But let me get the other two in. I didn't realize I needed 2 hands to get them replaced. Flip it and see if that helps us with rehearsal for right now, and then we'll come back and see what happens there. It's a $200 investment. Well, yeah, after shipping. These are 35 or something, or 40 each, and then the cost to ship. But I don't mind as long as somebody rents that from me at some point. All right, this little slip cover for these rolling bars, these rolling steel frames, worked out great as well. And they're going to be something that can kick around. This, fresh, new, both sides. There'll be 4 of those. And then there'll be 2 that have the library books on them, I believe. And so they can roll up, at least on this set. And however we decide to use them, whether they're at an angle, whether they're straight, whether there's a doorway between, whether it's tight, they'll all work out and be another great use of those things that we had made for another show. We can use them in this show in the beginning with those slip covers, the fabric, and then with these walls on them. So now it's just a matter of making enough pieces. It takes one 10-foot 2x4 ripped in half, one 8-foot 2x4 ripped in half, and then half of another 8-footer ripped in half to go across the top and to get some little blocks at the bottom. I think that we've got to go up on a block that goes all the way across the base, and so I have to maybe adjust this a little bit. One of the things we're going to run into is adding this last piece of luan. We got this collateral bowing here, and it's just going to sit down over these, and it won't be connected below with any framing. We're going to have trouble keeping that seam flat, essentially. And so it may be a better idea to slide the full sheet down to the base, and then after this framing, where there's no more, we don't have to have a clear cavity for that steel, I can put a full 2x4 across flat. Thereby it'll give me a place to attach the seam above and below and keep it smooth. And so I think that this works good as a prototype, but we'll probably take it all back down to a certain extent and make those changes. I've also got to plot out the notch that I want and basically settle on everything, and then make the rest of the components for all of the units. Try to make components together at the same time, which is a smarter way to go about it. But this works as a great demonstration of what's possible here, and I think that's thereby what we're going to go and do. This thing's glued up and dry, so this set piece can be used now, and we'll just get to work on making all of these pieces for this. Meanwhile, we're still waiting to find out about this clearance. All right, I framed up the second one of these here, and like I'm saying, I want to get the other one fixed up so that you've got essentially a bottom plate. It's a better arrangement here. The longest, it's already the shortest piece by a crazy amount. The longest possible piece is a best practice, so there's no use in a button pass doing it the other way. And then I put this full 2x4 center line at 24 inches from this end, so that I can use the small additional piece here, and then the rest of the 8-footer can go down in that direction, where I don't have to tie it together. I can't tie it together here with this pocket for that steel frame. And then I got the books taken apart, and it's awesome that they were sort of, instead of just being a sheet of luan, especially since there was an additional component to make them longer than 8 feet. Somebody did it with this 1x4, which is a true 3/4 by 3.5, which is left over from something. I don't know why we had this around. However, it'll probably make a great face frame. It's better off committing these pieces of luan with the book finish to these sleeves for those rolling walls. And then, I'll put this out on the front where it can be appreciated for what it is. Well, I can't really show it here, but if we were to go down this and create what looks to be, some thickness there. Now the edges, I'll have to figure something out, but it's just great that we've got basically what we need to do a simple face frame. No shelf, no shelves in front of that, but I'm sure I could figure something out. For now, I'm going to probably, I guess, apply it to that upper side and then turn it over. Or maybe I'd be better off, why don't I put the luan on this side and then flip it and put the books on. That way the books don't ever have to lay face down. Basically, when they're on, they'll be done. I'll be done with it. So let's get the luan on this side. here's another rabbit hole to go down. And one of the issues that I face, this will make a good example of what happens, what can happen without thinking fully through what it is that you're trying to accomplish. When we first made these bookshelves for Beauty and the Beast, I thought it was an inspired idea to make the bindings by rolling up scraps of paper, doodling on them, and sticking them to this Luan. It was painted brown because it's like a wooden bookcase, and I've made mention of the fact that really it should have been painted practically black, if it isn't like that shadow there, just fully dark black first, and then you could put the books on, and then you would put the faux face frame on, which is what I'm using this wood to represent now. I'd like to put the books on one side of these sleeves that we're making for these rolling steel frames, right? However, not only will that work well for this show, it'll be a nice place to put these, basically, or have them live on one side of these, and therefore they're available for something else. Meanwhile, the other side of these flats essentially have got the ability to be changed, and there'll be 4 flats that have 2 sides each that could be anything other than this. However, the 8-foot section was put to the top, and the 2-foot section, to make a total of 10, was on the bottom of this originally. But like we said, I don't want that seam down here because it's misalignment visually, but also when we've got to slide these off and then slide the steel frame back into them at any given point, going in a couple of feet and then slamming into that edge if it's hanging down lower, the loading and unloading of these sleeves onto that steel frame is going to be something you want to be careful of. Okay, and so because we want to get this to live as long as possible and add production value to it and not do any kind of double work, for now I am going to anchor the Luan to the wooden frame, and I'll probably pull up whatever edge, books at the edge that are necessary to make the sort of layout for the screws that I want, and set those aside, because we really shouldn't sandwich them underneath this wood on the edges. And I think the wood should be painted brown because it's catching light. But I really hate to paint black around all of these, but considering how much hot glue was used and time and effort went into putting them down, I'm open to that. I also dislike the fact that everything is so perfectly vertical. The first thing the books do as a group on a shelf is tip to the left or to the right, and that would have really helped this. And that's why I kind of wish that we could take all the books off of this and potentially even replace the Luan, and then paint everything black, and then put the books on, avoiding the edges, or potentially paint the edge face frame brown and put it on, and then start. And it may not, I suppose I'd probably set some of the books at angles and get them, to go underneath by a little bit where the face frame is going to go, and then the final thing would be the face frame. Because in theory, the books can tip over behind it, and so you may as well let them do that visually. And I think we could double what this thing will get for you visually just by making a little more organic, actions with the books, allowing them to be a little bit more dynamic and interesting to look at, even more so than they already are, and leaning into the right layering and color layering, etc. And so at this point, I'm not prepared to make a decision on exactly what we're going to do, but I'll either come back and cover what we decided, or you'll see me get back into this. I'd like to make an improvement here because I think there's so much value already, but there's so much value that was sort of under leveraged, and I want to sort of make headway there and not make a false move. But I think for now it's safe enough to put the Luan on and then get these up and rolling around. And if we just paint out or around them and tip a few books over for the sake of the ones that we remove at the edges, and make a little headway now, perhaps maybe if we go a little ways into that, it'll become so clear what it is that I'm thinking we could achieve, that then all of a sudden sometimes just making a visual aid like that, and it's like, oh, now everybody's on board. I can see what you're talking about. So not that I'm getting a lot of friction necessarily for any good reason, other than that it's going to be a lot of time and effort. and you know, the cost in the hot glue to put these down with, and then just to undo it all and have to redo it. I wouldn't use hot glue. I would suggest the woman that was so kind and had such a great idea in making these books this way and did such excellent work here is allergic to a lot of stuff, and so we didn't want to get the aerosol spray glue going. But I would suggest applying a glue to these and then sticking them to whatever it is that you're using for a backer board. I don't think hot glue was the best idea here, but it was hypoallergenic, so that was just fine. And I don't want to make anybody think that I'm disparaging the effort. I just think that it could just grow in terms of quality here. Let's take an opportunity to do something. Let's see what happens. So here's another tricky situation, because in theory, the stringer and the treads and everything should have worked out completely flush and coplanar with the face of this framing. But due to the cuppage in such a large piece of lumber, due to, you know, in this aspect on the stringer, in this aspect on the tread, we end up with discrepancies here because, of course, this is cut squarely on the miter saw, and it's practically flush there, and we're flush here. But you can see that the discrepancy continues to grow there. And so that's just the nature of planning on monolithic rough lumber like this to be perfectly dimensional and flat and straight and square overall in its cross section, which is not the case. So in putting everything together, you've got to police that fact. And so I've got some framing that exists above it and framing that exists below it. And I can already see up there that we're departing the face of things, like in the tension in that sheet, it wants to lift. And in the gappage that I had going on here. So I have dialed this upper, let me back off here. This 2x8 has been anchored right along and then left to play out straight. And then I anchored this 2x4 to it, and I see where that wants to be. And I could even put a string on that piece so that I can see that it's not deflecting in or out, which I'm fairly certain it isn't right now to look down it. And with my experience here, I'm going to skip that, but there's something you can do. Now with the level as a straight edge, and any type of straight edge will do so long as it's long enough but not too long, which is what I'm going to run into. I don't have a 4-footer here, I got the 6-foot. So if I can, the only place that I can be here on the framing way over there is between those two sheets. But then I can send this up to there, and I can see that I'm staying on the framing here, and I'm staying on that framing, but you can see how far away from the stringer I am in that case. And you can see here that I'm on framing, and I'm touching the framing, and I'm touching the framing right there. But then we pull off, and between that stick and the level, and we're on the framing up there with that straight edge, I've got to come out that much. And so I'm going to choose to pull this stick here out that far to close this gap, and then I'm going to pin it and I'm going to let that carry the surface of this luan, and we're just going to skip anchoring to the stringer inside the wall for the sake of the wall being nice and smooth when we're all done and not having a weird wiggle in it here and fighting us and what have you. So that's just something you want to watch out for. And the same, and again, like it's a product of, flying a straight edge across all of the same theoretically similar coplanar surfaces and finding out where you're heavy, sticking out, proud, or where it's light and how to avoid that. And so I'm where I want to be here, and that comes right into this framing here. And honestly, this is the way you want it to be. It's ideal to have to come out to catch that plane. If all of this was heavy sticking out, then you've got yourself a real problem here. So not to break my arm off patting myself on the back, but I realize that we're going to have problems like this in translating a CAD plan to, real life. In fact, I don't even know. That's not even square. That's like 93 or 4 degrees. But I know that, and so I play all my error to the right side of everything, metaphorically speaking, to where we get done and everything's a bit shy and it's no problem to go across the front of it. You don't want all that stuff sticking out heavy or you have yourself a real problem. And so things like that will start to become apparent to you as you work, and you'll be able to avoid them when you get down to things here. But again, in making up this little section, I wasn't going to draw this all in CAD and plan it all out and show myself the stick length that I need to make here. That's something I'll do on the job site. So now that we're through that and I've got it where I want it, I'll make sure now too that it lines up to this framing here. And then when I'm all done covering it up and I want to fill it in with screws, I can snap lines reliably, and I can go right from the top screw that I put in, because I'll note the layout there, and I can come down to one of these lower screws and just re-snap over this line, and that line will be good right on through onto these sticks, and I won't be missing them. And we're also going to start here and start high and leave this strip in the middle to be filled, rather than putting that to the top. Although in this case we could, I'd rather not. We'll make a nice long 8-foot strip here, and then we won't need to have a short strip. But this one will go right over this opening, and then I'll trim out this opening, which will hopefully make it, and I've overlapped. So I've overlapped this, despite it's supposed to look like the exposed 2x4 of the wall. So I guess I could do that. I'm not sure. And put a layer of luan in there, and then attach a full 2x4 on just to create that appearance. That was something I was looking at over here, was to leave this much more luan and come down in a strip down the side of the wall to try to control this for square, and really end up just tearing the luan there because this is just weak in that way. And I wanted what looks like the 2x4. Although, because I didn't have a solid plan from the beginning, if I'm leaving this one to be the theoretically exposed one in the cross section of a real wall, then that one would be left. But over here we're sticking the stairs to everything, and so if I don't use luan in there, well, then there's a rough framed hole behind the stairs, which is okay until you take the stairs off in a blackout and you start to see inside of this thing being bright light colored wood like that. So then I have to start painting out the interior of this black as an extra step to make sure that doesn't jump right out on stage. So the easier thing to do is to just leave this and paint it the base color that we choose to paint things. And then there's that aspect of it. But then we get over onto this and we end up with this, and then maybe I apply another 2x4 to that. We'll just have to see. And then, if I get 2 pieces of styrofoam to make the brick and I put them on here, and this one sits back the thickness of a 2x4 and the other one sits proud, and it just, nothing anybody's going to notice, but as an exercise for me and in teaching or showing others where the pitfalls can be, there's just a lot to consider here about where to put layers of material on and where not to. I very well may have been better off including a strip of luan down the side of that. I might go so far as to remake that piece. Not sure yet, but that's what's going on in my brain right now. right, so I established just now that this 2x8 was applied lower there, like fully, the top edge fully below or coplanar with the bottom edge of this plywood. And as we get over here, it's actually sitting a little high. And then it keeps going uphill over that length to there. And then of course I framed in underneath it on the site rather than by a drawing. And that bit me because I filled that all up and then I clad it all. And then once I put this up here, I see this gap is almost an inch. It's 7/8 of an inch wider than down there. And this is nice and level, and I know that this is all factory and up off the floor about the same amount. And then when I wanted to find where to screw the sheet in without hitting the edge of the plywood, I came down to here and figured it was about 10 inches up from this. So I measured to 10 there and 10 there and snapped a chalk line. And then I'm looking at it, and that's going up because the sheet is sitting up almost a full inch. And so if I were to pivot that down, it would push this seam off of that stick for whatever reason. And this hole was cut quite squarely, and it went up and was practically perfect to this square opening when it went up. And so, you know, there's a bit of a gap at the top of the sheet right there, and it's a bit crunched at this end. So I could push that 2x8 up most of the way that it needs to go and you know, change everything all around right now. But I don't think it's going to come back to bite me. I will have to make a custom rip to fill that space. And the stairs roll up and connect, and we've made sure of that. It's not so much that you can tell visually, and we're going to put a super gaudy wallpaper on this, so that'll further help the situation. And I think I am going to take this sheet down and put Luan right down that side, because this fake joist is proud, and I'll need a little fake top cap and fake 2x4 stuck on here, and I'll do the same over there. And really, this is incorrect as far as showing the wall built up into the bird's mouth. It would actually be like the way this bird's mouth is over here. There would be the wall beneath with a top plate, and then there'll be a little fake 2x8 rim piece that I got to glue on, and then this 2x8 goes along, and then it's been cut, and then it starts up again right there, and then the end grain of a 2x8 would be applied there, and then the end grain of a 2x4 top plate, and then a full 2x4 below that will all be applied to the Luan to make it look like the cross-sectional wall that it is. And I obviously, you know, I wouldn't have necessarily built the wall here short and put a little 2x8 section in up there all just to catch that wall. And I might have if I had started at the beginning and planned exhaustively what this was going to be, but we've been playing it loose on this site now. And again, my head has been elsewhere. I got a lot of other stuff going on, unfortunately, this year, which is keeping me from doing my best effort. So I'm not going to be shy about pointing it out where it could be better. It'll ultimately work in the end. I'm a little disappointed in myself so far, but hopefully I could pull a rabbit out of the hat here. It's mostly stuff that I'll notice or that I'll know is in there and could have been done better, but it is what it is. I don't think, like I say, it's going to suffer in the end from that. It just kind of bothers me. And standing here wondering about what I'm trying to do when I'm covering it with video, I'll just be honest about it. I'm not loving it. I don't love the idea of putting a custom rip in there. It's always nice to basically check your work by installing a perfectly, you know, table sawed rip, and it sits right down in there with just a little gappage or something tolerable. At this point, I'm going to put the end on, I think. So first I'll hack that short. I'll put a sheet on vertically and then trim it up with the router, and then I'll put a hole in it to reach in and get that latch. And when I do it, I'll make sure that I'm racking this thing back and forth to straighten it up. And I guess, yeah, I have enough sheets on this side to router those edges off and pass those. And we'll be in good shape here, but in terms of a logical stopping point for rehearsal. And then I got to get the mobile drill press down here and drill the stage. Really, I'm going to drill the central trapdoor because we want to pivot this piece. And so I think that putting a hole through a stick across the bottom in the middle of the width of this piece and dropping a heavy pin down through there. So right now we've got a piece that goes across to catch one of those wheels. It's actually going to be further that way by some ways. I'm going to jump across with a 2x4 at this elevation, and then I've just got to drop this pin through a hole in it, and there will be that much more that can go into the stage. But we can have crew ride out in this piece, and when the outside crew puts it on its marks, the inside crew can drop this into the hole in the stage, and then the inside crew can pivot from mark to mark on their cue in the song or what have you, and this set will appear to do a turntable move, and I'm excited about that. And so we'll be with the center of the piece on the center line of the stage, and then it's a matter of how far up or down stage. Well, to start with, since we're drilling, I'll put it in the central trapdoor door, so in case we have any problems, it can be replaced, or it isn't, out here in the rest of the stage necessarily. And I'll put it probably, excuse me, yawning, at 1/3 from the end, so that if we want to move that location up and down stage, we don't necessarily have to re-drill. We can turn the door around in the hole, and we can move up or down stage about 18 inches, maybe 2 feet of a difference, which could make a significant difference if you want more room for a dance number, or whatever. And it may be as simple as using it facing downstage in Act 1 of either this show or another show, and then turning this door around during intermission, so that the second time the set comes out and gets pinned, it looks the same, but you give yourself another couple of feet of downstage space to have a bigger musical number. So there'll be that flexibility in drilling just the one hole. We can certainly drill others in the future. I've got a plastic shoulder bushing or flanged bushing that I'll set down into the hole, so the action is real nice and smooth and it's nice and professional. And I think I'll probably use my mag drill, take the opportunity to use that to control it for perfectly straight up and down by sticking it to that large piece of steel that I bought to offset it on a beam that I was trying to drill. And then I think I'll see if I can drill that piece of steel with a couple of holes, just to use some very short screws to anchor the steel plate to the floor, and then mag drill to the steel plate, and then thereby control the drilling operation for perfectly straight up and down. And it'll make that little bit of overhead that I added last year worth it again to use it, and do a nice job of that. And then we'll see if we like what we see and can work with the set moving under lights with I think Matilda going up and down the stairs potentially. It could be really cool, and it's a challenge, but in these little steps every year that we take, we continue to add production value, and I don't mind it. I want to get this done as soon as I can, so that they can start to practice with that. And as soon as crew starts to come to rehearsal, they will be familiar with the fact that we're doing this, and it won't be something that comes along after they start practicing with the set. So I want to make sure of that. So I think by next week we'll have it to where we can pin the set to the stage and spin it and hopefully clear everything we need to clear. And I'm still waiting to find out if we can get the image from the projector to the floor while at that physical height, which clears that ridge. So I'm putting off any further efforts in this set piece above this line until we find out what we've got to do. I could always clip that ridge off and go straight across, but the thing is, you see this. That's the thing. We can't light up there. We won't put someone's face or head up there. We won't ask anybody to stand up here. It'll be mostly right along, at this level or whatever, and no higher. But it can be seen, and it makes it a house to see the ridge. As soon as you clip the ridge off, it's weird. It's not as though you can't see it anyway. Otherwise, I would just do that. And if you don't do that, then you start tipping the roof angle down, then you start pushing the ridge of the gable or the dormer down, and you start making the dormer less viable. And the whole point of pivoting this thing is to send this image, or send this portion of the set sort of up front and center, and feature Matilda upstairs, or at the very least bring the bathroom, which is what this piece is, adjacent, have that come out and attach. And so when she needs to go in the bathroom and dye his wig, I think, or I don't know exactly what she does in the bathroom, but we can feature that's what she's gone to do, and then come back all by moving the set, which should be cool. Hopefully it works out. well, I don't think I covered any of these issues, but this sweet idea that I had to supplement the wall, the wall sets in this show, but also to create something that would be far more functional for the middle school show that happens every year with no budget for set building, is to build these sleeves to slide over those rolling jail bars. Or really, they're just rolling steel frames because the jail bars are PVC and wood frames. So we got 6 rolling frames that were built for Chicago, and then the jail cell bars that were put in to a wood frame. All right. And it's, oh my God, these are just bed sheets, and I think we're going to have to further downsize these to get the colors to stay on the right side. But there's just a simple 1x2, which is an actual 1.5 by 3/4 wooden frame around the inside and across the middle, and then some 1/2-inch plastic bars. And so they got colorful bed sheets and sewed them into these sleeves for this show for the hospital, all together this color, and then that musical number where they've got a variety of colors. And so then I said, let's make some flats that slide over them and see if we can't make mobile walls. Boy, does that work great. But here's the only issue, because I painstakingly measured out and decided on what size notches to make in the bottom of these using the hole saw. And as you can see, we ended up with an interference problem immediately, which irks me. And really, when you start looking and you come to find out what the situation is here, it becomes more frustrating, because if I line these up, now they're substantially welded, and of course a little bit of variation in the way that they line up may be from being banged up, kicked through, or whatever else, reefed on and tweaked out. But there's quite a good amount of alignment here to there, there to there, there to there once again, and then here to there starts to become an issue. And what's that about? This is far smaller on the left in terms of overall width, and then here we're even smaller again. Once we've lined up everything over there, we're smaller a significant amount again. So we've got some discrepancies. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 that are fairly consistent, and we've got 2 troublemakers. And we've decided, I think, to make just 4 sleeves first, and potentially even the potential for us to not even make another set of 2 this year. But I can't afford to try and, because we're going to have to switch them out in the show. This is going to have to be the set piece for early in Act 1. And then when they have an opportunity, they've got to support these sleeves flat with 4 students. And then 2 or 3 students have got to slide these steel assemblies up inside carefully without anybody getting their fingertips guillotined. And then it's got to be stood back up again without issue. And as soon as you go out of this theater space, this block constructed for the grid, for the bars and stuff overhead, as soon as you're outside of these doors, you're stuck with drop ceiling at 9.5 feet instead of 10, and those are going to be 10 feet. So we normally use a lot of, some of the operations that we have, or when a set piece isn't going to be necessary till late in Act 2 or only after early Act 1, we're done with it. We go right down the hallway here when there's a show and just get stuff right out of our way. But those frames won't be able to hide out here if they've got the sleeves, and we'll have to be putting the sleeves on and stuff essentially in the wing space somewhere, which is going to be a real project. And it may be the reason that we end up cutting these down to 9.5 or just a little bit under, so that operation can happen in the hall. But boy, do I hope we don't have to do that, because I'm already going to tear these apart now, and we're going to submit these 2 frames to the welding shop at the school and ask them to fix the location of these feet. So at least all 6 of these would be functional. And so when I'm done with this video, I'm actually going to pull them off to the side. And then I'm going to see if what I laid out for notches on this, because that one never got notched. I didn't put another piece of Luan on there. We decided we're going to put it at the top. And I also decided that I'm going to go for that full block across the bottom, which means that all this vertical framing is correct. These blocks need to go away, and I believe this vertical framing needs to be relocated down 1.5 inches to where this end and this end are flush, and then the longer block applied to the bottom of them. because this one is overall end to end 1.5 inches shorter than the other one that I made as the second version, where I left the partition between the small piece of luan and the large to be above the socket for the door, so we could have a flat 2x4 to catch both edges. So what am I saying? I'm saying that I've basically got to take the luan off both sides of this unit and unpin the cross piece at the top and move this down to where this is flush after I take this block out of here. Make a couple new blocks to slap on the edges. Send the luan that was on here down to flush with the bottom of the framing, and then add the small piece on both sides, and then see if the notches, now I don't have nearly enough people to try this out physically. I'm going to have to exhaustively measure those notches and see that they do hopefully work out. My chances, it's very likely that the one that I chose to measure to do that is one of these 4 that are all the same. Let's hope it wasn't one of these other ones. It's certainly a mirror image dimension from both edges, and the problem that these have is that they were welded up at different distances from this face than the rest of those, making the center line of the unit overall different distances from each leg. So it's quite likely that since I got measuring up the whatever one I did, I was able to lay those notches out at the same distance from the outside edge. That means that from the center line, they're also the same distance essentially, which means that very luckily, and if I had gotten significantly different measurements, it would have tipped me off at that point to this issue. So, and I don't know which one we were on when we crashed that, because I just had to get that back off from there, and they needed to use these for rehearsal, so then they got sifted back in. So I'm going to move these out of here, get them set up to be welded, verify that the notches I'm putting in work on the 4 frames that are good enough already, modify that one to suit or match the other one that's done that has books on the other side of it, and then potentially make enough sticks and start framing up for the other 2, where these books are going to go on that, and then there's another set of books again that really end up on the library side of the set piece to tie the set piece into those. Although I'm told we have more of those book bindings that were made up but not used on this shelf. So there's a chance that we would make lower shelves and put some of the same types of books on this set piece, but then put like reading posters or something else above, or a bulletin board or something else like that, more visually interesting, and use, and then I would have to know that all 3 of these flats that used to have books on them would be translated to one of those frames. So lots of unknowns, but I'm going to move in the right direction hopefully today to make some progress. Well, that is about as far as I can go with that today. I can't load it onto any of those steel frames and just double, triple check. I did walk the other one up that's notched and just set it straight down on these legs, just adjacent to the cloth there. And that was, made it pretty clear that that will be fine, and that in fact it fits all of the 4 that are pretty much the same within the tolerance of a little bit of warping from students welding and stuff like that. So they could be basically hit with a hammer a little bit to if they need to be more perfect than they already are. And so I've also not got any good looking 10-foot 2x4s, and I'm going to need 2 more and half a dozen 8s to do 2 more of those. So I've got, I could get a half a dozen 8s, and I might get, I'll at least get 3 or 4 10s. You never know what you might end up wishing you had. I've got to get more 2x6 too, so I better be pretty critical of what I've got for lumber here before I leave today. That being said, I guess that's an optical illusion. That just looks whack. It's just driving me crazy being around this situation that I'm going to leave alone and not mess with it. So I'm down to now, I want to put a piece across. I want to jump across the inside here at the true center line of, there are some variables here, but essentially the bird's mouths. The vertical cut in this bird mouth, the vertical cut in that bird mouth, they amount to the outside edges of this house structure. So that's like 174.5, which is 84.25, or whatever that is. 80 something and a quarter. I'll find that location inside, but I had to go back and forth on a few things with this drop. This is just not Harbor Freight. I think they have them. A Tractor Supply pin. And, I was looking at what I was able to do there, thinking, I need to be careful about how far down into the floor this pin stops, because I don't want to have to drill all the way through anything, the trapdoors in particular, because then you'll have a little column of light shining up if the lights get flicked on down there. Variety of different things. It draws attention if there's a hole. Kids playing, putting their fingers through it and getting stepped on with someone upstairs, and any other number of things. So I'd like for it to just be a little divot along the lines of these divots, here that have been removed from the doors to accommodate this hardware, and it's, no problem. I'm also not going to go right in the middle of the door. Like I said, I'm going to go toward one end, probably about a foot in, and then it can be turned around and we can move 2 feet up and down stage with this center pivot without re-drilling it, without the hardware that I'll talk about installing into it, that flanged bushing. So I know that I can jump across at this elevation, which I did over there, but then it's just butting into the bottom plates of the walls. So you really need a scab block on the top going over onto the plate on both sides. And then I could cut a small section out of the center, because I also want to be on the center line of the width of this piece. I don't think that there's any benefit to not doing that, because really, that's where we want to be. And if we want to move it up and down stage, we would move where the hole in the floor is. Although worst case scenario, you could also move the hole on the set piece that you're designing, if you want to use that in the future, if you're doing something like this at your, in your location. The next thing was then, so I need a pin long enough to stop here, and this is going to go down into the floor about 1 inch, which is exactly kind of what I wanted. So I've got to be at that lower elevation. So like I say, I have to take a notch out of the blocks that I use, or to use 2 blocks, and make a space to where it can fall down to that surface. The next thing I realized was I could roll it back over this access hole, and I could come up from below with a piece that goes from luan to luan underneath and screw up. And then the surface that the pin stops on is the bottom surface of that plate. And so then I could go with a shorter pin that moves from 1 inch in diameter down to 3/4 in diameter. And then I can have a flanged bushing off the shelf locally, which I couldn't find for 1 inch pin size. So I've already bought this, and I ordered the plastic shoulder bushing, flanged bushing for in the floor, to go with this 1 inch pin. So I suppose there's no benefit, just more time messing around, sending stuff back. I will proceed with this plan, which is to recreate that down toward this way and take a piece out of the middle of it so the pin will fall down low enough. And then I guess the other thing I'll do is where there's one layer of material, like I say, the pin will go all the way into the floor. If I move to the one way or the other where there's 2 layers of material and I re-drill it, that will make a place where the pin could be stored, because you don't want to get into a situation and during the show and no one can find where the pin went. Although that would it would hold it off the floor by 1/2 of an inch, which is where the luan is. I just hate to have any kind of worry that it would get caught on anything. So I very well may just make a place to hang the pin inside the set. And this is the type of thing that we get with the crew, and it's a special operation, and the person who's going to do this does it every time, and they always put the pin in the same place, and everything's always the same. I'm also considering that wherever that jumps across in the other location, then I would apply a piece of 3/4 inch plywood between the 2 of them as a surface to sit on, and just drill a big diameter hole saw hole right through that plywood to expose where the pin will drop in and be removed, or make it a big finished notch or something else like that. Try to make it nice. And then this individual can when they're in here and ready to go out, they can just sit on that, and it'll keep them from getting, slipping, falling, putting a foot down and getting ran over or anything like that. There'll be a nice big surface that they can sit on, and then, when they get back out, that everything is all good. They can also step over to that far end. I think they'll be at that end from the pivot over here, and that'll be where they steer this piece one way or the other. Because since we're this close to this opening with the center line, it won't be that effective to push within this space here, and we won't be able to push out here without there being somebody that you can see, without being able to see the crew member who's doing it. So I believe it'll end up being one crew member that carefully moves that end this way and then brings it back, which will take quite a bit of doing. It'll be somebody who has to be have quite a bit of beef at their disposal, somebody with some serious power and surface area to their shoes and feet, or 2 people working in unison. We'll have to see. But for now, I'm going to locate and create the piece that jumps across, put that in, and put a surface on it, and try to get to that point. And then when I get the approval to do the drilling, we'll do that much, and I'll show you. I got the mag drill around, show you how I set that up to do a nice job of drilling that opening. And I guess we'll stick with this hardware for now. Okay, well, the wonderful thing about mag drills is wonderful things. Their tops are made out of drills, and their bottoms is made out of magnets that stick to the steel plate that you have to drill holes in so that you can screw through it into the stage, so that you can use the mag drill on a stage that isn't ferrous to drill a carefully aligned hole that's as perfect as possible to accommodate a bushing. But let's see if we can get this steel plate drilled with some mounting holes. right, I don't think this will jump out at anyone. It'll be a functional piece of infrastructure going forward. It sits just a hair below the surface, and there's some room inside underneath it to get a pry bar or a tool and lift it if it should have to come out. And it's nylon, but the press fit was so nice and snug that I'm not concernicus about it trying to come out of there. And then I just added a couple of blocks that are still well off the floor. They're, you know, probably 2 inches or more, but it gives it more registration, because before we were just in 1.5 inches of material and in the floor, and there was still some like toddling around that could happen. So now there's far less of that. The side loading doesn't influence any of that. The end of this has a nice lead on it, and I may put the round over or the chamfer in the trim router, and hit up the hole there. And I may even, there's enough meat in this nylon to take and put a bit of a lead on that inside corner, which is nice. I went with the heaviest one, and the others can go back to McMaster. But again, it sort of disappears, and we can turn that door around and we can move it 2 feet up or down stage. So as described, went pretty smoothly. That's what you get when you buy a mag drill. I'm just glad to use it since buying it now. Every month or so since I've owned it, I've had a reason to bring it out, which has been awesome. And not running the cord for a mag drill, and it being another, battery operated, component to the fleet.
Keep out of the reach of children. What if I was hair funny? For now, stop. In the slip of a pole, there's a tiny hole. Seat of a ward in the creek of a floorboard. The sword can begin with a flap of the whip. The tiniest one has the mightiest thing every day. Starts with the tick of a clock on skates. Start with the tick of a clock. If you're stuck in your story and want to get out, you don't have to cry, you don't have to shout. A little you can do a lot. Cross the line of
All right, well, it's been some time since this bit me this badly, but I was a stupid, and in making this space 36 inches 1/4, I gave it 1/8 of an inch on both sides of all of those frames, and I really should be giving it 1/4 of an inch. You've got twisting potential in this steel frame. You've got racking potential in this steel frame. You've got the ability for it to be bulged to the outside as a result of this, or for any reason, and to have a waist instead, and to be bulged and wasted and whatever. There's a variety of things that, even though we desire this to be a perfect square steel frame, the one that I've been beating on, and then we've had these in and out of a couple other sleeves and a couple other things. We can't keep track, and it has to be something that works in any combination. And so the two that had legs that are wildly out of the right place, those have already gone in for service, and I've ground, and this is one of the good ones, or the ones that measure out the way we need them to. And then I ground the welds smooth there. And then I went so far as to take the wooden frame with bars out, because the way that that was placed was shy on one side and can be proud on the other side, meaning it's sticking beyond. So then the overall dimension grows from 1.5 inch cold rolled or whatever formed extruded steel. Then you got this side of the steel and this side of the wood, which is an overall wider dimension. And the wood is rough and whatever other, and this is a real rubbery, latex paint that I can scrape off with my finger. The texture, and if I were to wax that all up or soap it up, then we're never putting another coat of paint on this again, as well as anything, as well as if we should ever get that cleaned and repainted, the moment they're used and slid into here again, even then once again, all the soap or wax that comes off from the sleeve will make it impossible to do a meaningful job of repainting those. So we can't do any lubricating. We mostly just need to have a sloppy fit that will accommodate kind of everything. Now, I can't easily make this construction any thicker, although if it comes to that, I may end up having to put, because we're in for a penny, in for a pound, I would have to maybe make, add the thickness of Luan to this, and then put another skin onto it to where we gain 1/4 of an inch in thickness overall. And the easiest thing to do, if we find out that we need to do that, would be to leave the current skin on there and set the trim router to pocket these areas out. Or at least, I guess, yeah, at that point, set the trim router to just pocket the door hole out and leave the rest of it solid, and put a new sheet and 1/4 of a sheet on there just to keep things moving. Because if you start taking that first sheet off and slicing on the table saw and trying to put enough pieces on and around this and then anchoring them down, but that's the thing, because if you leave it on there and screwed down, when you come to put the full skin over that, you've got to avoid everything. You're going to want to screw it down essentially along the same lines as you originally did. And now I eyeball, and I do a lot of screwball eyeballing, if you know what I mean. And so I've got a pretty decent layout in the way which you watch me attack it to come from the middle, and then I decide whether I'll subdivide that and then subdivide those areas, or if it needs, to be divided into 3 areas, and just try to keep things evenly spaced. But it's not precise enough for me to measure out a different layout. I'd be running into screws periodically. Nightmare situation. So let's not even go down that road yet. What I am going to do is I took the skin off. Now you can't move these over and then re-screw them all into position or use the same. It's not enough that we need to move it, and that's an awful lot of work. And so what I'll do instead is to take a hair's breadth, like take 1/4 of an inch, shoot to take 1/8, but ultimately probably take 1/4 off of these 2 sticks with the circular saw by setting the depth of the cut shy of the skin on this side, so we're not perforating it and weakening it along this line, because that would be terrible if we're coming and going and twisting in this pocket with a steel component and ultimately pop through where that saw blade brushes it. And thankfully I did the smart thing, which is every one of these that are 2x4s cut in half, I laid them factory down, factory side. So the thickness of this thing overall is all a factory milled 2x4 thickness. As you can even see here, in cutting one in half, this is a bit shy of 1 3/4, probably 1 5/8, and this is probably closer to 1 7/8. By cutting it and incorporating the kerf and using the gauge on the saw and following the edge of a given 2x4 that I'm ripping, because some of them, they wander, and if you snap a straight chalk line down it from the halfway point on one end to the halfway point on the other, if the board wanders at all and you meticulously cut that line, you build in this failure. So more often than not, I figure out where I'm trying to be on the circular saw, and I pinch the table or I pinch the shoe, and that keeps me, as a fence, moving down the stick at a certain distance from the edge of it, which is how these were ripped. But you could still introduce a problem like this. Now, if I had stood that up and stood this up, not only would I have a rocking problem where the heads of some screws that I was putting the luan down are ripping through, you can bake that into a project. So anyway, I can trust that all this stuff is within mil spec. And so if I set this blade shy of this, I should essentially avoid cutting into it almost everywhere to any amount. And then I will have to like work that little sliver back and forth and possibly score it with a razor at the bottom to get it to come away, and then put this thing back together using the same screws and screw holes, and then see if we can't get that steel frame to slide in there. And if that's the solution, then I've got to get it done to the other two that have been made, and that one and that one. And then the fourth one that I'm going to make, I'll probably just send these sticks out, rather than going to whatever I went to there, 36 1/4, I'll go to 36 1/2 overall width, which I should have just done from the beginning, given the discrepancies in the construction of these here. But I'm learning my lesson the hard way for the millionth time. Too much tolerance in rough work. And the minute you let tolerance run away from you and just start writing everything off because it's just for a set or who cares, whatever, then you get this problem. So somewhere in the middle, we've got to find common ground on appropriate tolerances. All right, so that went in there far easier. However, it was a little snug toward the end, which makes me believe it's going to be some trouble to get it out. And more importantly, two things. It's enough out of plumb. You probably can't see it. We need something for comparison. The main curtain hangs plumb, and so you can see that it's tipped forward, hopefully on the camera, which is annoying. Yeah, there's the edge of my set in the back, although this is right in the way. That should be quite plumb, those edges. And if you look at that for comparison's sake to this piece, we've got a lack of plumb by about 2 inches probably from the bottom to the top, at least one for sure. Which is in the relationship of the leg to the steel frame, and so that needs to basically be beaten, heat and beat until it's at 90. I gotta check that one on that frame. But also I came in and when I stopped, I'm scrubbing the floor. So it leads me to believe that if I get this out of there and I measure that depth, it should be 85, because most of these it's another thing I didn't check. They should all measure up at 85 1/2 from the floor, at the top edge from the floor. And they're close. These two are anyway. But the pocket should be 1/2 inch short, so that overall it stops about 1/2 inch off the floor, which it does not do. And so I got to see if one of the frames is a little bit short, or if I mathed bad. Trying to come up with, yeah. So they're all quite similar in height, which is something that's halfway decent. I'm going to cut the bars out of them. They were just poorly installed, and then trying to keep them in one piece so they can be sort of set aside and used if we want to put them back to being a jail. In the end, would it be nice if they could be bars and steel frames and then sleeves for them and everything could interchangeably work? That was the idea. But in realizing that, we're running into the problem with craftsmanship and the difficulty in making steel frames square. Fireball Tool has a recent series where he gives this project essentially to they're smaller but similar sized material, gives it to a bunch of professional fabrication shops, and you see how hard it is to make a steel frame out of any type, square, flat, and to within a good tolerance, because in the heating and welding it just warps it around. And for what they are and for who made them, they're quite functional. It's just in the and they're older now. They're not brand new, but you could see here the discrepancy in there. When I line that up, this is the amount that we're out of plumb with this one, and so that's he's going to need adjustment. I couldn't see this when the fabric wasn't on them. So either that middle one, looks to me actually like the middle one. Oh, Jesus, it's hard to tell. So, can check all that stuff too, because making that longer just plays up the fact that it's not plumb. Fun, wow. Okay, here's what I can see for square. The problem being that as soon as I'm off of this component and up and over this weld onto this other one, there's a degree of discrepancy there. However, it's, if anything, this one's lower than there. So it shouldn't hold me up and change what I'm seeing overall as much as it could in another way. But for me to hit it there, you can see that it needs to be driven that way. Almost, you know, at least 1/4 of an inch at the top. And the same is true over here. You can see the gaps which there and the fact that we're touching here. So I can stand on this in place. As soon as I take the biggest speed square out, the rest of them fall out of my rig because I don't have the time to mess with it. I'll stand on it and I'll smack it with the dead blow and see if I can't get it to pivot and at least cut that amount in half, because that's a huge step in the right direction with the dead blow. And then in an effort to just stop all the rework, I took a bunch of screws back, but it immediately failed on the last set when I put something under it to hold it out of my way to make these changes. And so it has me wishing I would have just taken it right off to begin with. This underlayment is so cheap, and that is a defect in the sheet. It should be doing what the other side is doing, but there's a weak area there, and that's all that it takes. So I've got that going for me, which is nice. And now I want to move this stick. I pulled out and measured the actual capacity. It should be 85 inside, and we're like a bit heavy here by 1/8, and we're heavy by 3/16 of an inch, if not closer to 1/4 on this side. But that's not going to really account for all of the scrubbing on the floor. So first I'm going to straighten those legs to the best of my ability, and then I'm going to set it back on the stage where the wheels are on the floor. And then I'm going to get a measurement from the floor to the top edge and see if it isn't 85.5, and also roll it up next to these other 3 that I thought were in such nice shape, and make sure that we're playing with a full deck in that way. These are all going to need a wild amount of grindage, and then I got to figure out who's not square the most, and if I can make headway squaring those legs up on the edge of this stage like that, that's what I'll do. It also makes it sort of easy to slide this sleeve off of the steel to go out and hook on the face of the stage. However, I should make a plywood corner to protect it. These scratches aren't from me doing this. They were here already, but I don't want to make any more scratches. So, and that could be how we take these apart between shows. But they just have to be slid. This just has to slide over that during the show. This comes out first, and then later they're walls. And then, you know, between, you know, Friday evening and Saturday evening, we can come out and put the protector on there and slide the sleeves off carefully and reset for the Saturday's evening show. And then for the Sunday matinee, we can do the same thing in theory. But we've got a bunch of rehearsing to do with those, because they are used with those colorful slip covers as choreographed components. So that's that. Let me see what I can get done here. Okay, we're going to have enough trouble with these being out of square and therefore not plumb to the surface of the earth, or for our purposes, the stage or whatever. It's very complicated. And Fireball Tool, like I say, has a great video about how tough this is to get done. So I'm not disparaging anybody. However, they do need to be as perfect as possible. And I can't be monkeying around with metal fabrication here. And so it's already going to be enough work. I got to cut the bars free of the frame. And then I went to my fab shop around luckily it's in this town, which is normally more of a hike for most of the rest of my work, but thankfully they're right here. So they said that as long as I cut these free and bring them these frames and these legs and a drawing that specifies where they belong relative to one another, they will be able to reassemble them where we're 90 degrees in this regard and 90 degrees in this regard, and the spacing will be correct and they will be centered on here, and they can do that with a couple labor hours. So I'm in the process of cutting the glue, cutting the bars free, and the way in which those were assembled they're not going to really last or hold up that well. They're going to have a heck of a hard time. They could carefully be supplemented, like some of the wood has broken up here. It's just going to be tough. I'm going to try and just set them aside, and if they want rolling jail bars again, we could use most of that stuff probably, and just repair or replace some of the pieces that are broken, because it won't be worth it for me to put them back in here probably for this show. That we don't need them for any reason that I know of. It certainly means fewer things inside of here for the fabric to touch and to kind of just be distracting. So I'm just kind of bummed. You can probably tell. I'll just set up and we'll cut a few of these free. And then I don't know where I'm going to cut the legs off. I may actually take them over there with the legs on and then work in their yard at the fab shop. Although now it's started to snow and become cold again. So not sure if I'm up for that. I don't feel like I'm up for it right now. I don't want to go all the way down to the other end of the school and downstairs and through doors that I have no help to hold to go into the welding shop and make grinder mess with reckless abandon. So I'll probably go back out onto the stage after rehearsal tonight and get these to a point where I can relax until rehearsal's over. I'm also going to see if they can grind my corners at the fab shop, because he's going to have a nice big setup for doing that quick and clean and perfect. And therefore, when they come back, we should have a much easier time of making them work as desired. But boy, is there going to be a lot of work between now and then. there you go. Relatively quick and easy if you make things streamlined and think first before acting. So I had overnight to think on this. I brought the other truck, which is, if anything, a little higher from the ground, believe it or not, into the bed of it, but I can go out the side of it and it's more fun to drive, and I could work on it here more easily as a sawhorse, and it's way better on gas mileage and whatever else. Then we get into how to take these apart, and for the most part it could be considered handy or unhandy that I left all of the weld on these components, and whatever left, whatever's left of the weld on the other component. Hopefully getting these out of the way and allowing him to just get a fresh start and cleaning up the area that he wants to work, and also asking him to flush in the outer 3 surfaces of every 4 corners on every 6 frames for me will be a huge step in the right direction. And maybe even check them for square and see if he can squeeze them in any meaningful way, if he thinks he can. But these will be a lot better. I mean, the amount that I could not make them budge back into square at all before by hitting them or anything is a testament to, if they're constructed square, we really can't rough them up or throw or drop them or anything like that, or beat on them in a way in which we're going to twist them out in a way that matters at all. So if we can make them up nice and square, they ought to stay that way for a good long time. These are Rose brand casters, I'm told, although I didn't have a part in building these. They look like they're really nice quality casters, and they've been welded on. Whether it's centered and stuff like that is, remains to be seen. However, I'm still pretty pleased with these. We will paint those components and probably spray all of this whole thing likely black enamel, something glossy and hard and slippery. I don't know if glossy. Well, it's hard to say. I'm getting ahead of myself. At this point, we're ready to go over to the fabricator and leave this stuff off and get back to work.